In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
It was the beginning, is now, and shall be, world without end.
St. Daniel.
Pray for us.
In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so we're continuing the book of Daniel, and we were going through Daniel's interpretation of the dream of King Nebuchadnezzar. He sees the statue. It's made of all these different metals. A rock comes, breaks the statue. It gets blown away with the wind. The rock grows until it covers the whole land. All right, prophecy of the church coming and replacing all these temporal kingdoms as something more permanent. The kingdom of Christ, a.k.a. Christendom. So, let's just say we left off at verse 40, and I don't remember if that's what we actually did, but we'll start there. Chapter 2, verse 40. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron which crushes, it shall break and crush all these. And as you saw, the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the miry clay. That's looking forward to how the Roman Empire splits into eastern and western halves. And there's still strength in it, but ultimately those two halves collapse as well. Verse 42. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with miry clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. Verse 44. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, nor shall its sovereignty be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron and the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be hereafter. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure. You have a question, Louisa? Okay. All right, so you get several allusions to the church and Christ as stone. So in the Psalms, one of the famous Psalms is the stone rejected by the builders has become the cornerstone. All right, by this, the work of the Lord has been done. Okay, and so that's a prophecy referencing how when Jesus does come, he's rejected by the Pharisees and the elders. He gets crucified, but then he becomes the cornerstone for this church. And then he also references Peter as the rock, as a stone upon which he's going to build up his church. All right, giving the church an image of, something of stone. And it's not until the eastern and western half of the Roman Empire is split by Diocletian that later along comes Constantine, who legalizes Christianity. Okay, and from that, it overtakes the Roman Empire. It overthrows those great kingdoms, by overthrowing Rome, conquers Rome by converting it, and then spreads throughout the world. So in chapter 3, we read, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold. Now, why does he make an image of gold? What could be the possible connection with what we just read? The head of gold. Okay, so in the prophecy Daniel just told them, the image, the gold part represents your kingdom. The metal below represents a different kingdom. And so Nebuchadnezzar now creates this idol. It's made entirely of gold. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to change the dream. He's trying to give it history a new direction, right? Setting up as if Babylon is going to last forever, right? And there is going to be no other king that comes and conquers him. Chapter 3, verse 4. And the herald proclaimed aloud, You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Therefore, as soon as all people heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Jump ahead to verse 12. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no heed to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image which I set up? Now, if you're ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image which I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up." So part of the tension that runs throughout the book of the prophet Daniel is, are the Jews in exile going to be monotheists? Okay? And the story centers around Daniel and his 4 friends. The first episode was that they rejected the food that was offered to idols at the king's table. All right, the next phase of the story is now they're being pressured by the king to now worship this golden idol. Verse 19, Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times, right? So the whole tension of the story is, are they going to stay true to the covenant, right? And so you see the number 7 worked in. And he ordered certain mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Verse 21. Then these men were bound in their mantles, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were cast into the burning fiery furnace, because the king's order was strict and the furnace very hot. The flame of the fire slew those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. All right, so because the furnace is so hot, in order to even get close enough to throw the guys in, the guys trying to throw them in died in the process. Now, you may notice that what the heck, your Bible has italicized text, and it jumps back to verse 1. So what's going on here is there are divergent manuscripts of Daniel. So the manuscripts of Daniel that we have in the Aramaic, and I think we have it in the Hebrew as well. This prayer of Azariah in the furnace and the whole prayer from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that follows is not present in the Hebrew text. But when you find the Greek and the Latin texts of the book of Daniel, this prayer is included in that. In addition to this prayer, chapters 13 and 14 are not present in the Hebrew text, but they are present in the Latin and the Greek text. And so sometimes Bibles, obviously not this RSV, but sometimes they will take this prayer and they just stick it at the end of the book as like an addition. And that's why the traditional verse, it goes back to verse 1, because you can think of this as chapter 15, verse 1, but it began right in the middle of chapter 3 in the narrative sense. Okay, so it's because of those 2 diverging manuscripts, there's this unusual jump out. So this prayer goes on, and it's the prayer they pray in the furnace. Go ahead and jump to verse 23. Now the king's servants who threw them in did not cease feeding the furnace fires with naphtha, pitch, tile, and brush. And the flame streamed out above the furnace 49 cubits, and it broke through and burned those of the Chaldeans whom it caught about the furnace. But the angel of the Lord came down into the furnace to be with Azariah and his companions, and drove its fiery flame out of the furnace, and made the midst of the furnace like a moist whistling wind, so that the fire did not touch them at all, or hurt, or trouble them. So in this furnace, there's a wind. Okay, an angel comes down, and this is again one of those instances where the church fathers speculate: is this the pre-incarnate Christ coming down to be with them? Okay, is this how he's taking his role in salvation history? But then also there's a wind, a ruha, right, in the Hebrew, so the Spirit is also present in this instance. And because of this prayer, this recurrence event, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, their story in the fiery furnace is often depicted on baptismal fonts in classical Christian art. Because, in baptism, the Spirit comes down and sanctifies the water. And John the Baptist told the Pharisees that come talk to him in the gospel, "The one who's coming after me is going to baptize you with the Spirit and with fire as well." All right? And so it's not uncommon in early Christian art. You'll see 4 guys in a furnace, and one of the guys looks like Jesus. And what's going on in that art is it's depicting this angel coming down to the furnace, and then it represents the Spirit blowing in, and it's creating this moist cool around these fires. Yes, Chloe?
May I use the bathroom?
Sure. All right, so let's jump ahead now, leave the italicized portion of the text, and now go back to the original chapter 3, verse 24. All right, it's just in the normal looking regular font. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He said to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men into the fire?" They answered the king, "True, O king." He answered, "But I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Jump down to verse 29. So the men escape the fire unharmed, and when they come out, Nebuchadnezzar has this proclamation to make. Verse 29. "Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their house is laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So there's this temporary conversion that Nebuchadnezzar goes under. This proclamation goes out in the kingdom, glorifying God's name. All right, another example of how God's always bring good out of the bad that happens. But it is short-lived on Nebuchadnezzar's part, and he eventually returns to his filthy pagan ways. All right, so Nebuchadnezzar dies. And in chapter 5, his son Belshazzar takes over the throne. And Belshazzar is a useless fellow in the sense that he does not really pay much attention to Babylon's military defenses or its needs. And he likes to party. So in one of the parties that Belshazzar throws, he remembers that, oh, my dad, when he destroyed Jerusalem, conquered this temple. And this temple had really nice goblets and bowls, made of gold, super nice stuff. Let's bring those out for my party. And so he orders his servants to bring out the vessels that had been stolen from Jerusalem. All right, and with those vessels, he makes a toast and he praises the gods of wood, iron, gold, silver, okay, to all their idols. And as this party is going on, and as he's making these toasts, a hand appears, floating in air, and it starts writing on the wall. And it writes on the wall, "Mene, Mene, Tekel, Perez." And it's writing in Hebrew. And none of them know what it says. And so, because it's writing in the language of the Jews, someone has the idea of, oh, go get Daniel. Daniel's like one of the big wise men. He speaks Hebrew. He could probably interpret this for you. And so Daniel interprets the writing on the wall in chapter 5, verse 13. Just trying to locate. Yeah, we'll just start at verse 17. Jump down to verse 17. Chapter 5, verse 17. Then Daniel answered before the king, "Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew, and whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would, he raised up, and whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened so that he dealt proudly, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among men, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys, and he was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of men and sets over it whom he will." So that kind of catches up the end of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. He goes temporarily insane and starts acting like an animal and like goes out in the fields. That's what all happens in chapter 4. So you just got some recap from that. Verse 22. "And you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. But you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, and who knows all your ways, you have not honored." Then from his presence the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed. And this is the writing that was inscribed: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then Belshazzar commanded, and Daniel was clothed in purple, a chain of gold was put on his neck, and proclamation was made concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So the Babylonian Empire has come to an end. That first part of that dream, where the head of gold, right, is overthrown by the silver torso, that's the Medo-Persian Empire. It takes over this night. And this event is also recorded in the histories of Herodotus, who's a Greek secular historian. He actually writes about how the Persians infiltrated Babylon. What they did was Darius ordered that a river that fed into the city be dammed up. And so the river actually dried up. And in night, the Persian army snuck in through the sewers. And according to Herodotus, the king was throwing this huge party, which is what's been described here in Daniel. And that night they go and they slay the king. And then Darius the Mede, who's ruler of the Medo-Persian Empire, comes in and he takes over control. So pretty interesting how, like, you know, you're starting to get to the point of history where there's a lot of texts that start to support the events that take place in the Bible. All right, now we're going to jump ahead to chapter 7. We're going to skip the story of Daniel and the lion's den. Most people know about it. If you don't know about it, your homework is to read chapter 6. Okay. So chapter 7. The vision of the four beasts in the Ancient of Days. Let's stop here and we'll take our break. And when we come back, we'll do chapter 7. If you don't know the story of Daniel and lion's den, then read chapter 6 during the break.